Probably like most of you, I've been reading a lot in these last days about Kobe Bryant. And certainly about his qualities as a man, but also his mastery of basketball. And as we read the commentaries, we see that there are few that have really risen to the level of Kobe Bryant as a player, as someone who understood the game. If we could transpose going from basketball to the world of the intellect, the Kobe Bryant would be St. Thomas Aquinas. He was phenomenal. He managed to do things that others had never even been able to do. The Lord had given him an incredible intellect that helped him to analyze, and always with a great love in his heart for Jesus and for Jesus' church. Interesting, though, that when we gather on this, his feast day, which happens also to be Father Pavlik's birthday, which is great, but as we gather on his feast day, we don't really talk about his intellectual gifts, but there are two themes in the readings. The first that comes through so clearly is that of humility. That's the last lines that Father proclaimed in the gospel. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles himself will be exalted. St. Thomas Aquinas, the Kobe Bryant of the intellect, was nonetheless always conscious of how any gift that he had came from God. It wasn't his brain, it was the Lord who had given it to him. He recognized that all of his work was for nothing, it was straw, unless it was based in the wisdom that comes from God. There's a difference between being smart and being wise. St. Thomas knew that wisdom was a great gift. It was being able to look at the world as God views the world. That's what we heard about in our second reading that was read so well as well. As we hear about that wisdom that comes from God, far more than human wisdom. St. Thomas understood that there's a great order in the world. And as wonderful as he was, that he was nothing in comparison to God. When he wrote about wisdom, he said it means taking an accurate look at one's self, being able to analyze where we are in relationship to God, who is the source of all that is good. St. Thomas always wanted to take that honest look at himself. It didn't mean that he didn't recognize his gifts, but he knew that they were sourced in God and God alone. I always love coming here to the Academy because I look at you and I recognize that you're at the prime of life. The Lord has blessed you with so many great gifts, not only in the area of academics, but in the area of athletics, the area of human relationships, the arts. All of those things, you're able to do incredible things. But I suspect that this academy was founded under the patronage of St. Thomas Aquinas, also to make sure that we understood that there's order in the world, that in spite of those incredible human gifts, that it's a failure for us to fall to a false pride. We always have to recognize what it is and who it is that blesses us, that it's God. Any gift that we have, whether it be good families, whether it be good health, all of those gifts come from God. It's then that we begin to be able to recognize wisdom, that we be able to grow in wisdom when we really are asking the Lord to be the one who informs our decisions. I look out at you and I think you have so many options before you. There's nothing that you can't do. And yet we're making mistakes if we're asking only what do I want to do and not what does the Lord want me to do. St. Thomas Aquinas was a man of conviction in that way. He knew that the Lord was asking him to serve him as a priest. He knew that the Lord was asking him to serve as a Dominican. He knew that the Lord was asking him to serve as a scholar. It's only in responding to that call that St. Thomas was able, in all humility, to pursue greatness. Interesting, St. Thomas speaks about two virtues. He talks about humility, but he also talks about magnanimity. That's that virtue that should be in each of you that aspires to greatness, not because of the glory it brings to you, but because of the glory it brings to God. Those virtues aren't in competition by any means. It's when we have that honest view of ourselves. Even the word humility comes from the Latin word for soil. When we're looking down, when we're recognizing that we've been raised up from the dirt, it's then that we're able to truly give honor and praise to God. We give thanks on this feast day for the gift that is St. Thomas Academy, for the way in which it helps us to find order in our lives, the way in which it reminds us that as great as our gifts, that they have to be used in service of a greater good, certainly the good that is the church, the good that is the human world as well, of humanity, always trying to do what we can to use the gifts that we have to build up our community. Certainly, St. Thomas Aquinas gives us a great example for that, brothers. Yet we want to make sure that we know that always we find our strength in the Eucharist. That's why on this feast day of St. Thomas, we not only celebrate him, but we gather around the altar to be nourished by Jesus' body and blood, where he invites us to enter into a relationship with him that helps us to put things in order, that helps us to keep things straight in our own minds, to recognize the great gifts that we've been given, but also to seek the wisdom that enables us to use those gifts in a constructive way. Through the intercession of St. Thomas, may we grow in that great virtue of humility. May we pursue wisdom with all our hearts, and may our hearts be filled with great magnanimity.